The movie starts as Mason Pettis drops out of law school with only a year remaining and the prospect of a six-figure salary, waiting to join the Army. He excels in the Army and makes it to the prestigious Special Forces selection. After some time, he gets married and has a daughter, which finally makes him feel like all is right with the world, and that he has found himself and his purpose. A few years later, Mason and his team are sent to the South American country of Palonia to execute its dictator President Juan Venegas. They fly there, and as they try to dismount, their helicopter is bombed, leaving many of the soldiers dead and Mason injured and unable to continue his duties. Therefore, he is forced to join the life he has worked so hard to avoid, and which he finds mundane and ordinary. One day, Mason drops his daughter at her school and advises her to stand up to and retaliate against the boy that bothers her. Mason then drives to his law office where he meets a client and accepts a menial case that doesn't challenge him. Then moments later, his old teammate from the Army, Sebastian Earle, surprises him. They catch up a bit, and Sebastian takes Mason to his high-tech contract defense company, where he offers him a one-time job as a personal security for Claire Wellington, a disgraced journalist who is traveling to Palonia to interview President Juan. Mason freaks out hearing the name as he still vividly remembers his last traumatic mission in Palonia and fiercely refuses, citing many reasons including his wife and kid. But Sebastian is unrelenting, seemingly having answers to every question and obstacle. Finally, Sebastian offers him $20,000 to tempt him and asks him to do it as a personal favor to him, and Mason accepts. Mason does his research on Claire and finds out that she was once an award-winning journalist before she was disgraced for failing to check her facts while publishing a story. Later that night, Mason learns that his daughter had gotten in trouble at school for beating a boy. Her mother is furious with Mason as she finds out he had advised her to do it. This comes as a breaking point that leads her to reevaluate their whole marriage, and she asks him to move out. Mason then informs his wife about the job which she isn't happy about and advises him to stay worrying for his safety and their daughter's welfare should anything happen to him. Mason doesn't heed her warning, says his farewell to his daughter, and leaves. The next day, Mason meets Claire and drives her to Washington, D.C., where they wait for President Juan's private plane to take them to Palonia. In Palonia, the president welcomes them at the airport. During the long ride out of town and through the countryside, the president openly flirts with Claire while taunting Mason. Then, as they pass through the beautiful scenery of the Palestinian countryside, they are attacked by guerrilla warriors, which results in 2 of the 3 presidential cars to explode. Mason quickly takes the driver's seat as their driver has been shot and maneuvers the car to crash into the soldiers. Mason then gets out of the car, ordering Claire and the president to stay back to engage in a shooting match. He manages to kill all the soldiers, and the president hails him a hero. The president looks around in his attackers' vehicles and realizes that this wasn't a random shooting but a coup. Therefore, Mason decides to leave the president behind to get Claire to safety, but she resists, reasoning that being in the middle of a coup with an active president is a story of a lifetime, and that she wants to document it firsthand. Mason threatens her, saying that unless she leaves with him, she's on her own, and so Claire follows him as he leads her through the thick Amazonian jungle. Unexpectedly, and to Mason's dismay, the president catches up to them as they take a break in the jungle. Mason calls Sebastian on his satellite phone and asks for help, while the president calls his nephew Jorge and suspects from their conversation that he's the one behind the coup. Mason and Claire leave President Jorge behind once again and go on their way through the jungle. Few minutes in, they get a call from a man claiming to be Sebastian's crew, and they arrange for a meeting place for an airlift. Mason is relieved, but Claire is sad that she could no longer use this as an opportunity to get her career back on track, and reveals to Mason's discomfort that the president was the one that sought her out for the interview and not the other way around. Mason doesn't have time to process this information as they realize the people coming for them are rebellious, and so they start to run non-stop through the forest. They somehow manage to evade the thousands of shots and explosives fired at them and keep running. After a while, they stop to take a break, but see the rebellion helicopter drop off more soldiers in the middle of the jungle and resume their running. Unfortunately, Mason and Claire separate and the rebellions circle toward her. Then, just as one of them proceeds to capture her, Mason beats him from behind and kills him. The other rebellion reaches them and asks them where the president is at gunpoint, but President Juan shoots and kills him from behind. Mason, as much as he hates the president, appreciates his help and thanks him. Meanwhile, Jorge is seen at the site of the helicopter's crash, discussing the failed attempt to assassinate the president with mercenary leader Jan Kohorst, who states that his clients are very unhappy with the inefficiencies of Jorge's men, as they want President Juan gone to protect their economic and financial interest. Back in the jungle, President Juan, Mason, and Claire walk, trying to navigate their way and see a little village from afar. President Juan is happy and declares that they have reached his home. They go into the village where all of its people come out to welcome and greet the president. He introduces the leader of the village to Mason and Claire as his old friend. The leader informs them that it's dangerous to walk past the jungle in the dark and arranges for them to stay the night with the locals, who are very hospitable. Mason, Claire, and President Juan wash up, get a change of clothes, and take a rest. Then President Juan proposes to hold the interview, and people gather around with excitement to be part of it. The interview kicks off as Mason records. Claire asks President Juan about the attempted coup, and he explains in detail that no matter who heard it from inside Palonia, the coup is orchestrated and funded by big companies in rich countries looking to exploit the country for its oil and precious elements. He also goes on to promise, from then on, that everything in Palonia will be done with its people in mind. This gets quite a warm reception from the crowd, and they throw a party overnight to show their appreciation. Later that night, as Mason prepares to go to bed, Claire comes on to him, but he turns her down as he is still in love with his wife. The next morning, as they prepare to leave the little village, President Juan asks Mason why he, of all the people and of all the places, was chosen to be sent here. Mason couldn't give him an answer and calls Sebastian to find out. Sebastian explains to him that he was sent with the cover of personal detail to assassinate the president with the help of his personal security men. Sebastian goes on to detail that he chose him for this work because he thought it would be good for Mason to exact revenge on the man who killed half of their team, and that the plan came undone when Jorge freaked out and jumped the gun by trying to assassinate his uncle first. Sebastian also confirms President Juan's claim that all this is orchestrated by mercenaries contracted by companies who have interest in the country's precious metals. Mason gets the picture now, and as he goes to Claire and President to tell them to prepare for their departure, Colonel Jan comes with his team to the village and demands to know where the president is, which causes a lot of chaos, which Mason, the president, and Claire use as a means of destruction to hide. While in hiding, the president sees the village's leader be beaten for information and reveals himself to the mercenaries. As the mercenaries proceed to shoot him, Mason comes and rescues him on horseback while Claire follows them. They ride the horses as fast as they can while the mercenaries follow them by car. After some distance, Claire falls off the horse and is captured, while the men successfully get away. Mason and the president decide to go to the capital and start on their way through the countryside. During the journey, Mason shares what he heard from Sebastian and is shocked to realize that the president was aware of it from the beginning. The president then tells Mason that he wasn't the one responsible for the attack on the helicopter a few years back. He shares that the news of the attack on the helicopter came as a shock to him while he was preparing to flee the country to Cuba as a result of the American military arrival. He details that the next morning a letter was sent to him to sign over some major oil fields with threats that if he doesn't, no one is going to have his back the next time the Americans come. The president concludes by telling Mason how sorry he is for the loss of his friends. Mason arranges with the mercenaries to trade off the president for Claire. As they begin the trade, the people of Palonia swarm the street, causing chaos and allowing the trio to escape. President Juan takes Mason and Claire to his palace and sneaks them in. There, the president finds Jorge basking in his throne, but instead of getting mad, he forgives his nephew on the spot and urges him to work with him for a better Palonia. Then the mercenaries barge in and open heavy fire, which kills Jorge. A fierce battle ensues between the mercenaries on one side and the Palonian soldiers, Mason, Claire, and the president on the other. After so much casualties and destruction, Colonel John admits to Mason that he was the one who ambushed them back then. The two get into an arm fight and Mason kills the colonel. Sebastian and his team arrive and take over on the side of the Palonian soldiers and help them defeat the mercenaries. Claire, who has been live feeding all of this, is recognized for her great and courageous work. President Juan forms a transitional government and steps down until a free election can be held. Mason reunites with his family and works it out with his wife as he promises to be a better husband. Few days later, after his return, Mason is surprised to receive a large sum of money as a gift from Juan. He is thrilled and takes his family to spend the day out. With that, the movie ends.